everybody. Thanks for joining us for another edition of the CTTA interview series. Joining us today is Peter Fuerst. Hi, Peter. Welcome. Hi. Good to see you. Peter is a CTTA instructor with us. He has tons of involvement in the industry, working with publications, manufacturers, training programs, and the like. And we're going to get into that a little bit and talk about some of those things. So, again, thank you, Peter. I understand you got your start in towing around 1965 when you were attending college. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah? How did you kind of get into it? What happened?
I was visiting a friend of mine in Southern California. And the phone rang, and he turned around and said, "Can you drive a tow truck?" And I said, yes. And the next thing I know, we were chasing an Anaheim police car going out to the 405. So my first tow was about 1:30 in the morning, going northbound in the southbound lanes of the 405, picking it up and getting yelled at because I wasn't working fast enough.
They just dropped you right into the fire.
Right. And I turned around and I asked Larry, I said, all this is neat and nice, but how does all this stuff work?
And then a career was born.
Yeah, it kind of went downhill after that.
Yeah. Now it says here that you owned and operated something called Air Salvage Service. This is something that sounds fascinating to me. And you did some marine salvage with this and crash reconstructions. Tell us a little bit about the Air Salvage Service you were involved in.
Air Salvage came out of the towing business in Palo Alto. A friend of mine called up and said, "Hey, we got an airplane in the slough with the rudder sticking out of the water. Can you get it out?" And I went out and went, "Yeah, okay." So we stuffed it full of tire tubes and filled them all with air and crawled and winched and pulled and whatnot, and we got it out. And I talked the fire department to come out, and we flushed the airplane, get all the mud out,
right,
and whatnot. And eventually, it saved the airplane. And that was the first one. And then about 3 or 4 weeks later, an insurance company called up and says, "We got another airplane."
That was fast.
It just got to be sort of a part-time hobby that got out of hand.
Yeah.
And Air Salvage actually covered like the western states and Mexico.
Wow.
On there.
A lot of area.
It is, but and the problem with the air salvage business, which my wife hated, was that you don't do it all the time.
Yeah.
You get to go to neat places, got a lot of adrenaline, get to do things nobody else gets to do, but you don't do it all the time.
There's no consistency to it.
No,
airplanes aren't constantly.
Well, they do and they don't. But you could get a job. I know one trip I was gone 9 weeks, home 4 days out of 9 weeks, started to go to Tahoe and back to the Bay Area. And I was in California. That one went down to Southern California, went over to Arizona, went off to New Mexico, came back. So, 9 weeks later, I'm home.
There you go.
So,
wow, air salvage. That's fascinating.
But we had airplanes go into the water.
Yeah.
And that's how we got into the marine salvage business.
Okay. Talk about that. Yeah.
With airbags and stuff like that. It's fun finding airplanes in the water.
Right.
Because as soon as they go below the water, they fly. So they'll end up a quarter mile, half mile from where they went in.
Just float away.
They'll float away.
Wow.
So
now back then, was there the technology where you could just hook up a monitor to some camera or other and just scan the bottom of the...
We were using fish detectors. We were using grappling hooks. And, I think it's over there somewhere.
Gotcha. A little trial and error.
Yeah, or that's where we saw the bubbles last.
There you go. There you go. Just track it. Then in 1974... you started working at the California State Automobile Association, and in 1980, you were named Supervisor of Training and Communications. Can you talk a little bit about the work you did there?
Well, I was still doing the airplanes when I was with AAA, but my wife decided I should get a real job instead of being gone all the time. And I took the job with AAA because they wanted to start training programs. Mm-hmm. So I was a dispatch center supervisor for a year or so while we were developing that. And then after that, I was doing training most of the time, was on the road.
Gotcha. Now, with AAA, I know you've worked with vehicle manufacturers, towing equipment manufacturers. What kind of tests did you develop to test this equipment, make sure everything was up to snuff and working well?
Well, let me put it this way. Working for the club did give me the advantage of dealing with AAA National. Got access to vehicle manufacturers, wrecker manufacturers, suppliers, all kinds of vendors. And in the process, one of the things that always interests me is, how does it work? Why does it work?
Right.
So you go to the Holmes Company, for example, and they come out with a piece of equipment. I would send it out, and then go meet with their engineers and figure out how it works, why it works, what doesn't work, that kind of stuff. And you build up a real good background in how all this stuff works.
Right.
And I was involved when they first started doing wheel lift towing equipment.
Okay.
And I wrote a white paper for AAA on weight transfer and everything, which we're still arguing about.
Still to this day.
Yeah. On that, one of the meetings that came out, everybody had 1-ton trucks back then. And after we fooled around with it for a while, I did some testing, and we found out that they needed to be on 1.5-ton trucks because of the long overhangs, they picked the front ends up. And that comment was not well received by the towing industry that they should all buy 1.5-ton trucks.
Didn't go over so well.
Didn't go over well on that. But in the long run, today, what's everybody driving?
Exactly.
So
exactly, changed everything. Now, I know you write for the Tow Times magazine.
Correct.
Do you do that monthly, or is it sort of
no?
When it comes up, you'll write an article about a topic?
In the beginning for I did some for American Towmen, and I did some for Tow Times. And then probably 3 or 4 years ago, I started doing a monthly column.
Oh, cool. Awesome.
On various subjects.
What's your column coming up?
The one coming up right now is related to the 60 fatalities we had last year, roadside towing.
Excellent.
When I was in Chattanooga, we talked about the move over law, how we got to really push that and whatnot. And I told him my feeling on that is that the move over law is going to help, but it's not going to cure standing on the white line,
right?
Working the traffic side controls, not wearing ANSI stuff, and not paying attention.
Right.
That the industry has some onus to fix that side of the problem, as well as work on the move over.
Right. Safety starts with the operator on the side
operator
of the
of the truck.
Yeah. Can't rely on everyone else. So that's where it starts. Now, speaking of the museum, I understand Peter was actually inducted into the International Towing Museum Hall of Fame in 1995. Is that correct?
Yes.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah, I was
That's
involved
quite an honor.
with the museum probably since about 86 or 87 when the conception. Because the museum used to be a traveling show in a truck.
Right, yeah. And we'll put a picture of that up. It's actually kind of neat. I've seen that. It's cool.
On that. But Steve Cardinelli, Bob Berry, and I and whatnot, we were all involved in the museum when it got started and on there. And I've donated a lot of my archival stuff to them, and I've got more stuff to go back to them.
Awesome. That's a heck of an honor. Now, Peter is currently, actually for the last, I want to say more than 15 years. It's not exactly on paper anywhere, but Peter's been a CTTA instructor with us for 15, 20 years, somewhere in there. You were just telling me before we started this that your first event, CTTA sanctioned event, was 1976.
Right. So, Monterey Trade Show.
There you go. Been with the association since
I've been
very early.
Been at, like I say, every one of the trade shows since then.
There you go.
Haven't missed one.
Nice. Be in Vegas this upcoming May?
Yep.
Tremendous. Love to hear it. Now, speaking of instructing with CTTA, I want to talk a little bit about our classes, because you are one of our main instructors and especially kind of headquartered here in Sacramento for most of the classes. But I just want you to talk a little bit briefly about why training is so important for a tow operator.
Training is what makes or breaks a tow operator. There's the image we have to the public, which is not really, I don't think really true, is that, a lot of these guys are very professional in how they handle themselves. But if you look at a business, they gauge it by the employee who shows up. As I do in my classes, I tell them, when you drive up, they don't care how long the company's been in business, what kind of truck you're driving, other than it better be clean and neat and everything. All they're looking for is, this guy going to fix my problem on that. And you got one chance to make a first impression on the public on that. And training is what gives the guy the confidence and the ability to get out of the truck, make decisions, and take care of the problem.
Right. And so what student coming in for one of our light duty classes with you, what can they expect? What sort of things, bullet points do you cover in the 2 days?
I think in my classes, from what I've seen, I spend a little more time on the customer service. Being with AAA, that's a big deal on that. And one of the first things I learned when I started driving a tow truck is that if you can take care of the customer, get them calmed down, straightened around in the truck, and that taken care of, the car's a piece of cake.
Right.
So I spent probably a lot more time than some instructors I've dealt with across the country on the customer service side.
It's very important.
Take care of that. And I used to hire, when I was out on the road all the time, and even with the club service with AAA, is hired for attitude. You can teach the guy to drive the truck, what to pick up, how to do this and everything. But if they don't have the right attitude and aren't comfortable dealing with people, you got a big problem.
Absolutely. And, we get a lot of folks that, sometimes ask, well, I was just certified 5 years ago. I've been doing it for 30, 40 years. Why do I have to come back to class? So what is the point of recertifying? Why are we re-educating ourselves?
Does anything ever change? That's what I tell them. I said, everything changes.
There you go.
Cars change, people changes, recovery procedures change, equipment changes, everything changes.
Right.
And when you do a class, you got two guys. You got the guy in there who's just starting, and it's all new to him. But there's a number of guys that come to class, and they'll say afterwards, geez, I forgot all that stuff. Or I didn't really remember all that stuff and why it does.
Right.
And there again, you also have guys that come in here that, for a class that, I've been driving for 4 or 5 years. They still can't tell you what the truck weighs or what it can pick up.
Right.
What kind of chains do you have? Well, I got chains. Yeah, I got wire rope on my truck, So if they don't understand the equipment and how it works and what the limits are, they develop this, just throw it in gear and let's see what happens.
Right.
And that's when stuff blow up and equipment breaks and everything.
That's when people get hurt.
That's when they get hurt and killed.
Yeah, exactly.
On that.
Exactly. So you teach these classes often. What's one kind of concept, one towing concept that, our students seem to struggle with a little bit? And why do you think that is?
Actually, that's two things to think about. Is that they have the basics they do all day long, to start the car, tow the car, all that. And I know all that.
Right.
And they get complacent. And it's odd. If you send them out to pick up a Porsche, probably no problem. You tell them go pick up a Ford Taurus and they'll damage it because they got complacent. They got in a hurry. They took a shortcut. That's one thing. The other thing that comes in is the recovery side, is that they don't do it that often. So it's a big deal. Everything's, and they don't think the whole thing through, like survey the scene, see what's going on, look for the safest, easiest way to do it. That's my criteria. I'm an old guy. I'm lazy, and it's got to be safe and it's got to be easy.
Right.
That's the way I look at it.
I think those are the two best routes to go. So that's interesting. So people getting a little complacent in the work, rushing perhaps a little bit, and then just not taking into account everything at the scene. So there are a couple of things that crop up in our classes.
Right. And then you look at class, and they will tend to overthink the problem. And there's a real simple solution, but by the time you add to it, then it becomes a big problem.
Right.
Just explaining snatch blocks, for example, how they work. Some drivers I've had or operators I've had in class, they think that's all black magic. And it's not. It's real simple stuff. It's been around since the Egyptians.
It's physics, yeah.
Yeah, it's just, you got to move the weight.
Right. So what is your favorite thing when you come to teach a CTTA class? What's your favorite thing about teaching towing?
Is spreading the knowledge. is getting it out and doing a logical order to build the intellectual base to make decisions and stuff like that. And as you go through the class, you can see the lights come on periodically. Ding. Yep. Now I understand this and stuff like that. Yeah. And one thing I do in my classes a lot is a technique I picked up actually from the Marines. I was doing it and I found out it's actually an official teaching deal of war stories. Mm-hmm. And some guys go, oh, God, war stories. But you got to remember, when I started, there were no training books. There were no training classes. There was no nothing. Right. The only way you pass the information on is at the coffee shop, or the next morning is, oh, guess what Bill did last night?
Right. Like a verbal history.
And then you go, oh, I'm not doing that on that. But when I tell, you do this, and this is the reason why you do it. And a lot of times I'll use an example so they can relate to that. Mm-hmm. If you do this, it's going to blow up just like this.
Right.
On that. It's like the example I use is when you were growing up and your mom told you to do something and she said, because I told you to do it, I used to drive her nuts by asking why. Mm-hmm. And that's part of it is why does it happen? And so I like to go in and explain, go do that. And I found examples. And a lot of times I draw the examples out of the classroom. Mm-hmm. Has anybody done this? Mm-hmm. And they relate their war story, and then we can kind of move it around.
Right, and they get engaged with that. That's awesome. Awesome. Well, I know that Peter's actually got a class starting tomorrow, and it's starting to get late, so we're going to let you go, get yourself prepared and everything. But thank you for stopping by. We really appreciate it. We've got some CTTA swag for you, a little hat and a slow down, move over bumper sticker on sale at CTTA.com. So that's for you. But we appreciate the stories, the knowledge. I know you are just a vault of towing knowledge, so I appreciate you coming and imparting a little bit of that with us. Okay. And good luck with the class.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, folks. We'll see you next time. Appreciate it.